series for 2019. This is June's webinar and part of a series that we started really as a response to a conference that we ran in Birmingham at the end of last year, our 21st Century Cities Conference. And we were aware that actually there was quite an appetite for a toolkit of a toolkit of themes really responding to the government's resources and waste strategy for this year. So we've actually held a number of webinars so far, and some of you may have been on those. For those of you who didn't attend, we've got details of the previous webinars we can send you. But just to give you a kind of flavour, in January we looked at the resources and waste strategy itself, and we had Victoria Hutchin from WYG giving her perspective on that. Apologies to those of you who are signing in from Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland who've already had your strategy for a number of years and way ahead, England. And then 8 weeks later, we had Trowyn Restorick from Hubbub looking at the issue of how do we change public behaviour? How can we actually get people involved in recycling more? What are some of the triggers? What are some of the tools and techniques that local authorities could use? So Trowyn is doing a lot of work in partnership with local authorities and with private sector, actually looking at some really interesting projects. Again, we've got further details on that if you want to get further information from us. What we've been doing this year is actually we've got a kind of a monthly webinar program where we kind of into splice, would that be a good word? No, we kind of share, okay, simply we share. 1 month we do a toolkit type webinar for local authorities on responding to the resources and waste strategy, and the other webinar that alternates would be on looking at RouteSmart, using RouteSmart and some of the tools. My colleague Beth Webb is running those that series of webinars, and she'll be last time she was looking at the attribute manager in RouteSmart. I've got up here a program of our future webinars. So the next webinar after today will be on Thursday the 27th of June, and Beth will be looking within her RouteSmart Masterclass at the import wizard within RouteSmart. And then it's back to myself, and we'll be talking to one of our clients on the benefits and challenges of introducing connected technology, and talking to them about some of the really interesting ways that they're lining up data, how they're lining up service data with back office data, with self-serve data as well. So that should be interesting on the 19th of July. And then again, we go back to a RouteSmart Masterclass, and we're looking at the networks and network tools within RouteSmart on the Friday the 6th of September. And then as far as we go at the moment in our program, Friday the 20th of September, we've got Susie Hamlin, who's a consultant who looks at why big organizations, how they work and sometimes how they don't work. And she's talking about overcoming resistance to new technology in the local authority workplace. And she's got some really interesting experience, which kind of fits into the, certainly into the waste collection and the, some of the resistance that you might be finding as local authorities from some of your teams and staff on, using new technology. So that should be interesting. Today's program really looks at is back to the sort of the toolkit side of things, and we're going to be looking really at the nuts and bolts of waste and resources management today. We'll be hearing from Sarah Knapp, who's actually an associate of integrated skills. Sarah's got lots and lots of experience delivering waste composition analysis projects for over 100 local authorities in the UK, and she's worked overseas, pioneered methodologies, looked at new sampling techniques, and presented data to clients in more friendly approaches, which is always a good idea. Sarah's written proposals for RAP in England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. She's been accepted on the DEFRA and RAP framework contracts for supplying waste analysis, so she really knows what she's talking about. She's had international experience as well. Just before we hear from Sarah, I just wanted to have a brief thought about waste composition analysis. And my background is in local authority waste management, and my previous experience, a number of years ago, of waste composition analysis was actually seeing its use as a way of analysing the makeup of the waste stream, so that you could then better specify waste treatment facilities. And whether recycling schemes would be possible or not. So that was a kind of almost a static use of the waste composition analysis type of tool. Sarah's been working with us for a number of years, and the type of work that Sarah's doing, and including some very recent work she's been doing with UK authorities, has been, I think, not so much. It is technical, but it's actually, I've kind of calling it here, I've just put down a note to discuss this idea of human behaviour sampling, because it's actually what Sarah and a team and what we've been doing at Integrated Skills is actually, for some of our clients, is looking at the way that they are using the bins that are provided. So as local authorities, often we would issue the 3 or 4 bins and decide to collect them on a frequency of X or Y collections per month, and then kind of sit back to see what materials result. But it is a fairly blind and a fairly numb type of way of assessing just how people are actually using those bins and those services. And so what Sarah's been working on very recently is looking in more detail for one client in particular on exactly how the public are actually responding to those resources that are being given. So, what waste are people putting into their residual bins, and how could they actually do things like recycle smarter to actually make sure that the local authorities are releasing pressure on residual. So I know many people are actually kind of really under pressure, having moved to a reduced frequency on residual waste. Is kind of, I would imagine that members are kind of being quite pressuring on saying, look, we need to move back to the from fortnightly to weekly, or whether it's from 3 weekly back to fortnightly or whatever. But so what Sarah's been doing is actually really, I think, really interesting in giving local authorities really detailed information on that human behavior, how people are actually interacting with it. So, what could be done, what promotion scheme, what environmental education could be done, what promotions could be done to actually make sure that people are using the capacity within each of their bins properly and properly recycling. So let me introduce Sarah. Sarah, I hope you're there, Sarah.
Hi, Stuart.
Sarah, it wouldn't really be a proper Integrated Skills webinar unless I asked you a completely random question. So my random question to start the whole proceedings is, I know everyone's thinking it, what's the oddest thing that you've actually come across while you've been doing waste sampling?
Oh, well, that's quite an easy one, actually, Stuart. A few years ago, when we were working up in Scotland, I had several teams out, and one of the teams was working up in the Airdrie area, and I had a phone call at about, 10 in the morning to say that they had found an 8-foot-long carpet python, and what should they do with it? So yes, it wasn't moving, so they weren't scared of it. But yes, unfortunately, it was dead. But we had to get in we informed the sort site manager, who then contacted a local vet who came to make sure that it really was dead and not just sleeping.
Oh.
And yes, very sadly, then they took it away to do an autopsy because they wanted to know whether it had been dead before it had been put in the bin or not.
Ouch.
So yeah, sadly, very sadly.
Well, yeah. Interesting. If anyone else has got any burning questions that they want to ask Sarah, then just to remind you, there is a questions section down in the bottom right. Please ask your questions, and we'll actually publish those at the end of the session once Sarah's actually presented, and we'll go through some of those questions and ask Sarah to actually talk in more detail. Sarah, I'm gonna close down my slide. I'm going to open up your presentation, and then I'm going to hand over to you. So Sarah, look forward to hearing about waste composition analysis. Thanks very much.
Okay, well, thank you, Stuart, and hello to everybody. Good morning. So I think we'll dive straight into it. So what is waste composition analysis? As Stuart was saying, in previous days, it was a fairly blunt tool used to measure the contents of waste feedstock streams at waste management facilities. But in more recent years, it's become more of a measurement and monitoring tool to see how well householders are performing in their waste and recycling, the services that are provided to them. So what does it involve? In the sort of the office end of things, it involves planning and sample selection, and then in the field, it involves collecting samples, sorting, weighing, recording, and then back into the office type field, you get the analysing of the data and reporting back to the client. Waste streams, it covers just about any municipal waste stream. Plus, I've also looked at post-processing streams, such as materials that are coming out of ADF plants, etc. Not an enjoyable thing to have to hand sort, but it can be done. So moving on, I suppose the first element of any waste comp project is the requirements of the clients, and it's their duty, their role to create a specification for their work. So the first steps will be for the person who wants to commission the project to really think about what information do they really want. Can waste composition analysis actually provide the data that they need? Why do they need that information? How will the data be used and who will use it? And all of those sort of points will help you create a specification document that will help you achieve your aims, either to monitor meeting targets or strategies, etc. And it's very important to think about at that point who is going to be using the data and what sort of format you want that data in, the level of detail. Do you want very high specification data, or do you just need low-level stuff? Data licensing is very important, and we'll come back onto that. It's important at that point for the person commissioning the work to really take ownership of their project, not get hijacked by other colleagues who might think it would be interesting to know how much glass is in the rubbish, but maybe that would just detract from the overall aims of the project. And then when you've worked out your specification, what you need, etc., then pull together a project team who really will help to deliver the work. And then the contractor that you commission to do the work should be made part of that project team. And finally, I think it's really important at the specifications stage to be realistic about what can be achieved. If you have a good understanding of the waste being produced in your local authority area, in your waste management plant, then you will have a better grip of what the contractor can actually, the information they can produce for you. And then you can set milestones and know the deliverables that you're going to receive. So I wanted to talk to you first of all, so the next 3 slides are going to be looking at different sampling methods and what the different sampling methods can achieve, and the best one, then choosing the best one to meet the aims of your project. So the first one is bulk sampling, and with this method, a fieldwork team will arrive at a waste transfer station or a waste management facility, and they will either be shown a great big pile of rubbish from which they can take a sample, or they will be told that X number of vehicles are going to be arriving throughout the day, and they will take their samples from those vehicles. This is the sort of the fairly, I think Stuart called it, fairly blunt instrument in terms of sampling techniques, but it's a cheap option. Lots of waste gets sorted. It is brilliant if you want to do statistical analysis. It gives you enough samples to be able to do that. And the data you get is very robust. a lot is sorted, a lot of samples are sorted. It's brilliant for working out what exactly is in a feed stream, or identifying what is in residual waste, what's not being recycled. It's great for working out strategies, targets, and even communications campaigns. If you can see what's in the residual waste, you know whether you need to target communications at X, Y, and Z. And of course, it's perfect for working out what sort of infrastructure or procurement is required. So a second form of sampling is the sampling that is normally requested by local authorities, and it's more about the monitoring performance, either of a trial that's been in operation, or a scheme that might be rolled out to a greater number of households, or just of the general recycling schemes in general, basically. So, and this sort of sampling is more targeted. So you'll work out the householder types that you have within your local authority, and then you pinpoint ones that will form the sort of the dominant household types. And invariably, household profiling systems such as Experian's Mosaic or CACI's Acorn are used to profile all of the households within an area, and then the dominant household types are selected, and those ones will be used within your sample frame. The other method that can be used, and it's used very widely in Scotland, is council tax bands. And the reason council tax bands are used is it's free to the local authority. The other two systems you have to pay for, and they are licensed, and you need to be very careful about the licenses for profiling tools, how long you can use them, who's allowed to look at them, and that sort of information. So, right, we know which households we want to sample to be representative of our sample area, and so the next thing is for the fieldwork team to go out into their collection areas. They know the right collection day, they know the right collection time. They get into the field, the team leader will carry out a household survey, which basically means he will stand in the street and write down which households have set out which bins and how full those bins are. And this will give the client an idea of set out rates. It's not performance, obviously, because it's not done over a very long period of time, but it does give an indication of who's set out. In addition, if you want the work repeated, it's important to know who set out last time and which households you need to include in the survey for the next time. The team will then collect all the waste and recycling, and the whole joy of that is that you have the waste and recycling from the specific households within a sample area, so you can work out the capture and diversion rates. You can consider recognition rates and that sort of information. They then return to a sort site, and they hand sort the waste, record it, weigh it, dispose of it, and recycle it. So this sort of level of data is helpful if you want to monitor how well a scheme is doing, and it helps to identify further recycling opportunities or the levels of contamination in the recycling, etc. So I put this slide together. It's not exhausted. There's many other things that are pros and cons for each of these methods, but basically the bulk sampling is a cheaper method, but it gives you a lot more data. Street sampling is more specific. It will give you more highlight level data, but it needs a great deal more planning, and you can have many more problems with it, such as miscollections or incorrect information. You're limited by the amount that you can collect in a single van, or it becomes very expensive. You need multiple vans. The collection takes more time, so less is sorted, and you end up with fewer sets of results, so it's more expensive. So moving on. Okay, so we're now moving on to the teams getting out into the field. And for a project to run as smoothly as possible, you need to make it as easy as possible for the fieldwork team. They're the ones that are at the sort of coalface, who are having to try and work out the information that you provided them with. So if they're going to a facility to, you know, collect a bulk sample, they need to know the exact address. I mean, some of these industrial estates where the transfer stations are situated they don't have a very good address system. So we need to be able to get our team to the exact right place. Then they need a name of the person they're going to meet and a telephone number. What sort of PPE they need to be wearing when they arrive? Is there induction before they arrive? All of these sort of things. And likewise for the team working at the street level, the team needs to know what they're going to find when they get to the street. They don't just want the street name, they need the street's postcode, how many houses they're going to find when they get there. But also really basic things like perhaps the households, they get to the street and the households have a back alley collection, so that in their eyes there are no bins to collect at all, but the bins are all around the back. We've just done a piece of work in the north and found that it was a back alley collection and you needed a key to get through the gates to the bins. So these are sort of things that you need to know in advance. So back alley collections where they need a key. If you're sampling from a block of flats, is there a bin store? Is there a caretaker? Are there keys? Does the caretaker know that their team are coming? And the worst possibility is that you get to a street and all the households have piled their rubbish up in one apron of grass at the end of the road. So you don't know whose waste is who's got recycling, who hasn't. That would be the worst nightmare. And it's only if you talk to the collection crews that those sort of things would be highlighted. So although, you know, the local authority, you know, will have a good handle on the waste that is being collected, it's the collection crews that actually know all of those little things that are so necessary for the fieldwork team. Also, you get things, assisted collections. Does the local authority want these collected or should they be passed by? Returning bins and bags to the correct places. Are replacement sacks required by households? Some households would tie a food waste sack onto their bin and it means that they need a new roll. So the fieldwork team need to know that sort of thing so that they don't upset anybody whatsoever, and they carry on the work as if, you know, it was the normal crew. And then finally, we've talked briefly about the household survey, which the team leader carries out. This is vital that it's carried out thoroughly and they know exactly which households have been included in the survey, because if you do want to replicate the work, that data needs to be passed on to the local authority so that they can repeat it again. Okay, so I've included this picture. It's to show you what the team looks like in the field. So this is a couple of chaps collecting from a street. Normally you would place one of these bulk bags over the top of the bin and then between them they would tip the bins. But some bins are, now we're moving on to sort of 3 weekly collections in some areas. The bins are so heavy, we actually have to remove some of the waste first and then we can tip the bins. So they fill these sacks up with the waste from the households that have been identified for inclusion in the sample, and then the van will come along. It's usually a Luton type van with a tailgate so that the guys can easily then pop the bags onto the van and then take them back to the sort site. So this is a picture of a sort site. This is quite a big team. I wanted to include it so that people could see the sort of space that's needed by the hand sort team. And the sort site needs to be definitely undercover, but it needs to have good lighting. They're sorting through material, they're handling waste, so they need to be able to see very clearly what they're dealing with. Undercover without wind, we don't want to lose half the sample down the road because it's been blown away. And enough space so that they can unload samples, sort, and then space for the disposal of those samples. This is a picture, it's not very clear, I'm sorry, of the way off. So the analyst has placed some material on the, we use platform scales, electronic platform scales, and So he's placed a box of material to be weighed. The team leader is then noting down the weight. So the analyst will call out the weight, and then the recorder will call it back and to just clarify that the correct weight is being recorded. And the final photograph is of disposal. So in this case, the team have been given a walk-in skip, and they're placing the rubbish at the back of the skip, and as you know, as they fill it, they move forward, of course. 1100 litre wheel bins are also very good for disposals, particularly if the residual is being placed in some, and then you've got other 1100 litre bins for recycling and compost, and then these can be collected. And they do need to be collected at the end of each day so that the waste is gone. So moving on. So deliverables. I think it's really important, really right from the start, from the inception meeting with your chosen contractor, that you know exactly what deliverables you're going to be receiving. And this needs to include the meetings that you want to have and the methods of communication. Many local authorities, many clients now will ask their contractor to provide them with a communications plan, so that they know that at the beginning of the project there's going to be an inception meeting face to face, and then there'll be emails and phone calls during the field work and setup, and another meeting at the end perhaps. The data, whilst in the field, the biggest disaster for any project would be if data went missing. So the fieldwork team need to have a very structured method for storing their data in the field, getting it transferred onto electronically, and then the data needs to be quality assessed and checked at data entry level as well. With ISL, we like to give our clients their raw data, which is just data entered into Excel spreadsheets, and then we analyse the data so that they get the analysed data, sort of pinpointing the information that they want specific to their project aims and objectives. So at the inception meeting, it's really important to agree with your client and understand how they are going to analyse the data and what level of analysis is required, and the level of detail and how you want to, or the format you want to see it in. Some people absolutely love massive spreadsheets full of data, and others would much rather you try to turn the contractor turned it into sort of bite-sized tables with graphs, etc. Agree at the beginning, and then you will definitely get that. Also, the report. Do you want a great big technical report, or do you want a key point summary? Agree in advance, and then you'll know what you're going to receive as a deliverable. I'm shooting back a little bit actually. Health and safety and well-being of the team. Before any project is started, before any teams go into the field, it's vital that a risk assessment is carried out at the sort site. We would at ISL, we would want this for ourselves, but also it's a requirement of the management team at any sort site these days. And in addition to the risk assessment, for which they will request a report, a copy of the report, they also want safe systems of work. And at this point, we also need to be taking recommendations from the health and safety executive, anything new coming out, any new warnings that the teams need to be aware of. And then for the safety of the team, in addition to the inoculations, the correct PPE, they need the field team needs to have all of the information that is required of them, what is expected of them. They need it in advance so they can see what they're going to be doing on each project. If there's a completely different set of sort categories, this should be sent to the fieldwork team so that they know in advance. And we also find at ISL that the best way to manage a team is to actually have somebody from the company with them. You can ensure quality is maintained, that the team are safe and happy, and they've got appropriate PPE, they've got good housekeeping, and they are getting on with the job that they've been asked to do. And the final point, we are hopping about here quite a bit, I wanted to talk about the status of the samples that we get these days. In the bad old days, a waste would be 1 week old. Now waste samples can be up to 3 weeks old, and they've been in a bin cooking for those 3 weeks. So they can become very difficult to hand sort. And it's just a point to be aware of when expecting a team in the field to get on with it and do their best and hand sort this. But if a sample is 3 weeks old, it can be very difficult to hand sort, and it will take longer. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about some of the common problems that arise from waste composition projects. And possibly the first one is, it's vital that you understand the terms and conditions of the license of your profiling data, particularly from CACI and from Experian with their Mosaic profiles. They do have terms and conditions which will have, they will impact on the length of time of the license and how long you can use the data and who you can share it with. You need to be very aware of those and make sure that you sit within the framework of it. The next thing I would say that will happen is breakdown in communication or communication errors. This is not so bad if you're doing bulk sampling at a waste transfer station, but if you're expecting a fieldwork team to go out into the streets and make collections, then they need to be there on the right day at the right time to collect the right waste stream. If a team arrives in the street and there's poor set out, is it because they've arrived too early? They need to know that sort of thing. We quite often find that with you're collecting in the street and you're collecting from fairly elderly people, they know exactly what time the normal collection crew come along, and they will set out their bins maybe 15 minutes before the wagon comes into their street. So if you turn up an hour earlier, these people won't know to set out their bins, and you'll get very poor set out, which will then obviously impact on the quality of data you can produce for that area. Another problem that we're having more often these days, as the frequency of the residual waste collection changes from weekly to fortnightly to 3 weekly, is that we send out a collection vehicle, one collection vehicle, to collect from X number of houses, but that number of houses is now, instead of producing just 8 kilograms each per week, it's a 3 weekly collection, and they're producing nearly 30 kilograms per household per week, per 3 weeks. And so trying to get that onto one collection vehicle just does not happen. There's a weight limit and you cannot do it. So you need to send more collection vehicles, which obviously has an impact on the cost. Householder concern. This is very easily dealt with in all cases. If you've got field work teams in the field, then you need to let the local police know where they're working. The local authorities should also let their call centre know, and everybody should have been given a letter. Now, with the letters, they can be handed out as the collections are made, or they can be sent in advance, and householders can be given options to opt in or opt out. If you ask householders to opt in, you'll probably end up with a very, very small sample, because most householders can't be bothered to get back to you, which is why invariably you give them the option to opt out, and it's only those that make an effort who will opt out of your project. You normally find that with opt-out letters, that you'll get a 10% opt-out. So you just need to make sure that your collection area has an ample number of households to be able to deal with a 10% opt-out. Sample management. This is really when you're back at your sort site, when the teams are back at their sort site. You get overzealous staff who at the sort site who are not quite clear about the project that's being carried out by the waste analysis team, and they might get rid of your sample before it's been sorted. There are ways of making sure this doesn't happen. Just good communications with the site staff always helps. Plus you can use cones and tarps and etc. just to cordon off your sample. But also it's important that you, the waste composition company provides the correct size team to get through the sample so that there aren't samples hanging about. In addition, you can the samples can be tagged. This is where you've got several teams going out to different areas and collecting different samples. If they tag their samples, their bulk bags that we saw in the photograph, then there's little chance of there being crossover between the samples. Because we are moving to 3 weekly collections or fortnightly collections, there is a great deal of samples are becoming bigger and bigger for the teams to actually sort. So it's important for the local authority or the person commissioning a project to understand what exactly can be achieved by the fieldwork team. And over the years I've been doing it, it's becomes very plain that one person can only sort 150 kilos a day. That is it. They won't do any more than that, unless, of course, they're sorting food waste. If one person could sort 150 kilos of food waste in probably an hour, but if the sample is mainly film and bits and bobs, then 150 kilograms of film to sort will take a huge length of time. So think about what will be in the waste stream and how much can be achieved. So, and if you're collecting from 50 households and you've just collected a ton of waste from those 50 households, A, how is it going to be collected? It's too much to go in one small collection vehicle. And B, how many people will, 1 ton divided by 150 kilograms, that tells you how many staff you're going to need to sort that sample. If you start asking the team to work long hours to get through more than 150 kilograms per day, then they will become overstretched, overtired, and they will make mistakes, and that needs to be avoided. They're working with waste. Waste is dangerous. And then I always suggest that the commissioning client comes down and sees what the fieldwork team is doing, audit their work, make sure that what they said they were doing, they are doing, make sure what you expected is really happening. And also it's useful to come down, see what they're doing, take photographs, maybe, if you run a blog, put that on, show, how the team is working, what it's all about. The last slide is just us. I mean, I'm passionate about waste composition analysis, and at ISL, any project that we do, we will work to the highest standards, to working as a team with each client to make sure that they will achieve their aims, so that they can move forward with the work that they're doing. And that's the end of my presentation.
Sarah, thank you. That was really good. And yeah, you really are a source of great wisdom on this subject. I wonder if anyone has got any questions that they are asking or thinking through in their head. Just a reminder, there's a Q&A box in the bottom if anyone has got a burning question they want to ask, or my guess is that Sarah might have touched on or covered most of the things that you might have been thinking about, but just in case she hasn't, then please type in your question and we'll actually respond to that during the webinar here. If anyone has a question they think of afterwards, then please get in touch and we can get back and let you know our thoughts on that. Following this webinar, we will be sending out to you a link to the presentation, so you'll be able to get the detail and go back through the Sarah's presentation. And also, we've been recording the webinar, so we'll be able to actually send you a link so you can either hear it all again, or you can pass it on to a colleague who you might think would benefit from hearing it for the first time. That was really thorough, Sarah, and I just had a question, but you've actually answered the question I was going to ask. So, folks, if there's no more questions, then I would like to thank Sarah and for that presentation, and I would like to just remind you all about the webinar program, which is here. The next webinar we have is Beth Webb, who will be running her RootSmart Masterclass and looking at the RootSmart Import Wizard. Put that in your diary. The next one after that would be one of our clients on the 19th of July, talking about connected technologies. It looks like, Sarah, it looks like you've fulfilled everyone's queries. No, we have got a question. Have you encountered an authority that has implemented fines as a result of contamination?
No, I think everybody's still trying carrot rather than stick.
Yep.
So although constant offenders, I think, are handed letters, and then they may have their recycling service withdrawn from them. But I haven't actually heard that that's been gone through at this moment.
Yep. I've got just one final question, and then we'll close the webinar. But I asked you earlier on, what was the strangest or the oddest thing that you'd actually found? Can I ask you about the second oddest?
Right. I think. I mean, when you're sorting through waste, I think you can sometimes be just amazed at how much of things there are. You can go through waste from 30 houses, and for a piece of work I did with RAP was to actually look at the amount of waste food that hasn't even been taken out of its packaging, and I have got photograph after photograph of the food waste, untouched food waste from different sets of 30 households, and it's just the saddest thing to see, that all of this food that is just wasted, absolutely wasted, in financial, ridiculous.
Yeah, that's that's a nice link back into the webinar a couple of months ago, which we had looking at how you can change public's participation in schemes, and Trowan Restorick from Hubbard was talking about their community fridge scheme. So, the ability to actually have community fridges where you could take that kind of waste material. You're not going to use it, so you pop it in a community fridge and someone else can actually use it. So, links in nicely to a previous webinar. Sarah, can I say thank you very much on behalf of all of us listening in? It's been really interesting. For those of you who've joined us, thank you very much. We appreciate your company. Please get in touch if you've got any queries, or if you feel that waste composition analysis is something you want to take further with us as a company, and look forward to hearing from us with copies of the presentation and the recordings. Thanks very much for attending. Cheerio. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Stuart. Bye.